makes you feel very powerful and strong. That's how I feel when I put on this blazer. Good morning, guys, and welcome back to another sewing vlog. If this is your first time seeing me, my name is Priscilla of Kim Dave. I am a Nigerian women's wear designer based in the UK. In this video, I'm going to be sharing how to create a collarless blazer. Now, I've often done blazers in the past, but usually we add a Revere collar or a shell collar or a lapel, but this time it's going to be one that just goes nice and smooth on the neckline. It's such a classic and timeless design that you can do it with plain or pattern/print fabrics. Now in this video, I think I'm going to use like a red wool because I want something nice, bright, but like one solid color. However, you can play around with whatever fabric you like. I think I estimate to use like 1.5 meters/2 meters of fabric, but I'll let you guys know the total fabric used at the end of this video. I'm going to share how to make the patterns first from my basic bodice and my basic sleeve, and then I'm going to cut and sew the piece all together. Okay, I'm going to leave links to all relevant tutorials down below and as a card on the screen as you watch the video. If you do enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up, and thank you guys so much for the love of my last couple of videos over the last few years. The fact that I'm here is because of your support from time, giving me feedback, letting me know how I can improve, and I never take any of that for granted. Now, if you haven't joined the KDVers, make sure to click the subscribe button down below. It's big, it's red, and it's free, so you get to know every week whenever I have new videos on the channel. And with that being said, let's get into this tutorial. The fabric I'm going to be using for the main outer shell of the blazer is this red wool fabric. I have a total of 2 meters here, but I ended up using only 1.5 meters. I also have a simple red cotton. This I only ended up using like 1 meter because it was just for the lining. I also got some interfacing. This is the type that you can iron on the wrong side of the fabric. I also grabbed myself a pair of shoulder pads to add structure and definition to the shoulder of this blazer. The last thing I'm going to be needing is some simple buttons. I ended up using just one on the front of this blazer, and this has a pearly white and rose gold detail. The sewing patterns I'm going to be using is my basic bodice and basic sleeve. My basic bodice I have a tutorial for on my channel already if you haven't seen that, but this particular one is my graded bodice from my PDF sewing pattern, which is available on the store, and I'm going to be working from a size 10, a UK size 10. The sleeve I'm using is from my basic sleeve tutorial. You can use yours or adapt a commercially bought sewing pattern to create the patterns for this blazer. Now I've already gone in to trace off the front and the back onto separate pattern sheets so I can keep my main patterns and reuse them in the future. Those I'm going to set to the side, and I'm going to start off with creating the patterns for the front of my blazer. So I'm going to put the back basic bodice plan aside for now and just focus on the front first. Now for the front, I already have the main lines traced off. We have our darts, bust, waist, the side seams, the grain line, as well as important notches. And the first thing I'm going to be doing is drawing in the neckline. Now I want the neckline to be a very deep V that goes towards the waist of the blazer, and then I'm going to be extending the center front edge by 1 inch so that creates an overlap where the button would sit. Now the hem, I wanted something actually curved rather than going for my traditional straight front hem, so I curved it in towards the hem of the blazer, so that is what the shape looks like. Once I had that done, I knew I could go in to plan my facing. My facing was roughly 2 inches wide. You can make yours thinner or wider. Just be mindful that it doesn't go through your dart. Now I'm just drawing in the facing on the bottom because I want a facing that goes from the neckline and connects to the front hem of my blazer. Now this is what it is looking like. I'm just adding notches, so when it's time for me to connect these pieces together, those notches would make my life a whole lot easier. You see what that blue line is? That is going to be the panel that would become the lining, and then the outer thinner edge to the edge that is green is going to become the facing, and then the whole piece is going to become the main front. So I'm going to go in and trace off all of the different patterns I need for my front. First off, here I have my facing panel, which is going to help me finish the collar, the center front edge, and the hemline of my blazer. I have my lining piece, which would sit inside of the jacket and will help me to have a really nice finish. And in addition to that, I added seam allowance around my main piece because that would help me join everything together. And I'm going to go ahead and cut out my main front blazer pattern. Once we have this front cut out, we have our front pieces. Now moving on to the back, since we already have our back plan traced off, I'm going to go in to draw in the other patterns that we need. First off, you would need to shape the center back waistline if you really want a nice smooth finish, and I'm taking it in by about 1/2 inch. So this tapers upwards towards the top back, and then you curve it back out towards where the hips or the bottom hem is. Next up, I'm drawing in the back facing, which should be the same width as the front. So however wide you made your front facing, the back facing should be the same so they can connect at the shoulder seam. I'm just adding a notch here, a total of 2, so that tells me that it's for the back. And I'm going to go ahead and trace off the facing and the lining patterns before cutting out this back piece. Now I have my facing piece here, which sits on the front. This I'm going to be cutting on a fold, so I have one piece that goes around that back neckline, and I have added my grain line and any annotations that would help me cut this out. For my lining piece, the difference here is I added a total of 1.5 centimeters or roughly 1/4 inch to that center back edge, and this I'm going to pleat back into the facing and into the hemline. And the reason for that is when you hug people, the lining would not rip from you stretching your back. Now I've gone ahead to also add a 1 centimeter seam allowance around my main back pattern, and I'm just cutting it out like so. So I have the back patterns of my blazer, a total of 3, same as the front, to be cut on fabric and then stitched all together to create the blazer piece. Now moving on to the final piece, which is the sleeve pattern. I have my sleeve block here, and this I am going to be tracing off onto fresh pattern paper so I can keep this original block and use it again in the future. So I'm just going to tape this down, grab some paper, trace around the sleeve head, the side seam, the hem, and just leave a little bit of extra room at the bottom if you want to be extending your sleeve a little bit longer. My sleeve block was not long enough, so my total sleeve length ended up being 24 inches because I wanted it to really be like proper long sleeve. So I'm going to draw in the new sleeve hem on the bottom as well. Don't forget to transfer your notches, indicating what side is the front, what side is the back, and what side is the sleeve head point, so that really helps you when you're stitching the sleeve into the armhole of the blazer. With tailored garments, precision and finish is everything. Now I went ahead to add seam allowance all the way around the pattern, but because I want the sleeve to taper in towards the hem, so it's a very slim fit around the arm, I'm going to be reducing the sleeve hem to 4.5 inches and then connect that back to the side seam like so. Just ensure that that top part fits around the top of your arm, and that way you'll be able to actually wear the garment. Now I'm just going in here to cut out my sleeve pattern along the bottom hem, along the side seam, and this is what the sleeve of my blazer is looking like. It's a relatively simple straight sleeve, but you can make a 2-piece sleeve if you want to. So these are all of the patterns I ended up with to create my blazer. I'm not going to be lining my sleeve, but you can line yours using the same pattern if you wanted. Because my fabric was quite thick, I knew I'd be able to get away without lining the blazer. So now that I'll have all of our patterns on, I'm going to pin this onto fabric, cut them out, and join them together. Okay, I have spent the whole day creating the pattern for the front, the back, and the sleeve of the blazer, and I've pinned them on the red wool there, as you can see. I think the total fabric used to be 1.5 meters, which is like 1.5 yards for those of you who like to work in yards. I'm going to cut out the main front. Just give you a closer view. I'm going to cut out the main front, back, as well as the back and front facing in the red wool as well. And then I'm going to cut the sleeve over there. I decided to go for a one-piece sleeve to just simplify the process, but you can do a two-piece sleeve if you want a more tailored fit around your arms. I'm going to cut these out, cut the lining, and start stitching everything all together. Okay, time to cut out all of the pieces. I am cutting out my main body or outer shell in the red wool. This fabric is actually very thick. I did not realize until I was cutting, but I'm going in here to cut my lining as well, which is in this red cotton. And once I had all of my pieces cut out, I went in to cut my notches using a smaller scissors. I also fused my facing, which went on the front and on the back with some black interfacing. I also have my back main piece here, which I have two pieces of, and then I have my sleeve, and I cut a pair of my sleeve, to one to go on the left and one to go on the right. Aside these, I have my lining pieces, which is just for the body. So I have the back piece, which I cut on a fold, and then I have my front piece, which I have a pair of. Now it is time to sew it all together, and I always like to start off with darts just to get them done with and focus on the other thing. That's just my mind. So I'm going to be transferring my darts from my patterns onto my fabric using pin and chalk. So I would puncture through the pattern paper onto the fabric using pin, and then turn to the wrong side of the fabric and then mark those points with a chalk, and then pin them together using some pins. So once I've done this for the left of my front, I'll do this for the right as well as the back pieces, and just have all of my darts marked away ready to sew. So I have my front bodice here all marked in. I'm also going to repeat the same thing for the back, as well as pin together the center back edge, so I know once I'm done sewing the back darts, I can sew together the left and the right back of the blazer. So this I'm sewing on my new machine. If you haven't seen the unboxing video, please go check it out. It is the Juki 8700 machine, and man, life has not been the same since I got this machine. The speed, the smoothness, everything is just so much nicer. And after stitching up all of my darts, I gave it a nice press. Look at that precision. Like, can we get into this? It's just suiting my body. So I'm going to join my front pieces to my back, and I'm going to be sewing the shoulder and the side seams, so I'll be able to try it on once I have them all connected together. This I'm going to be sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance for both the shoulder and the side seam, connecting my front to my back. Okay, I've popped on the blazer just to check that I'm happy with the fit and the length. Ooh, this is so beautiful. I'm glad I went with this curved edge on the bottom of the front. I think I'll only be able to fix like one button, just one button there. And initially the plan was to put the button a bit higher, but I think I'll put it a bit lower, so like here, just the one button. That's what the fit looks like on the back. Very nice and smooth. It's a really relaxed fit in the sense that I'll probably be able to wear like only blouses and tank tops inside. I don't think it would have enough room to wear like a thick jumper. So this would be like a very good transitional piece. Like I'll be able to wear like a nice blouse, a thin jumper. But oh, this is so cute. This is so cute. Ooh. Okay, I'm very pleased. All right, so I'm going to go on and attach the sleeve. I almost feel like I could even leave the edge. at the bottom edge like this, but I wouldn't. I'll finish it properly, so don't worry. But I'm going to go in and fit the sleeve on the arm, and then I'm going to attach the facing and lining combo along the neckline bottom edge and use it to finish the bottom and the neckline of the jacket. That's what I'll do. Since the sleeve is not lined, I'll use the facing and the lining combo to finish off neckline, bottom edge, and we'll finish this baby off. But this is so very elegant, very refined, very sophisticated. That's the right word, very sophisticated. I'm going to go into work on the sleeves. I have pinned right sides together, and I'm going to be sewing up the side seams of my sleeve. This I'm sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I pressed it flat afterwards. I didn't overlock it, I just left it like that because the fabric doesn't fray, so that was a real blessing in disguise. But you can overlock yours, use bias binding, or add some lining in there if you want a smooth finish on your sleeve. And I'm going to be pinning my sleeve into my armhole. Thank God for notches, because you can just help yourself by using those. Match sleeve head to sleeve head, side seam to side seam, and match the front of the sleeve to the front curve and the back to the back of the bodice. So this I have pinned into my left and my right arm or arm opening, and I'm going to be sewing this on my machine. Sewing sleeves would never be a nice experience, in the sense of you always have to stretch things and make things fit, but when it's done nicely, it is the most satisfying feeling in the world. So once I was done doing this, I actually went and pressed it on my iron with some steam just to relax all of the stitching before pinning in my shoulder pads. Now I'm using a medium sized shoulder pad. I feel like I should have used a small, because a medium just felt a little bit much, but that's the size that I worked with. This I always like to pin first before sewing, so I know I'm putting it in the right direction and it's sitting where I want it to sit. So once I had that pinned out like that, I took it in and added some pins on top of the sleeve head, because I'm going to be sewing the shoulder pad on the seam allowance on the inside of the garment. After sewing in the shoulder pads on both shoulders of the blazer, I set it aside to work on the facing and the lining. I have pinned right sides together of my front facings to my back facings along the shoulder seams, and I'm going to be sewing them up on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, repeating this for the left and the right hand side, and then give it a nice press to relax all of the seams. I'm going to be moving on to work on the lining of the blazer. These I have pinned using the same technique for the main body. So I've pinned in the lining on the front, and on the back I've pinned in the dart. And I'm going to be pinning together the shoulder seams, because the plan is to sew up the darts on the front and on the back, as well as the shoulder, leaving the side seams open, because we need to attach the facing first before closing the side seams of your lining. So this I'm going to be taking to my machine, sewing using a normal straight stitch, making my way from the beginning all the way till the end, remembering to do my back stitch to secure that seam, and then give it a nice press to relax all of the stitching. Once I have that in place, I'm going to be grabbing my facing, which I have joined all together, and I'm going to be joining the facing to the lining along this edge like so, because you remember the front facing goes all the way from the front neckline down to the front hemline, so there's a little bit of that side seam on the facing. So this I'm going to be sewing from one edge around this curved around the back, down the other front to the other side, and you should have a piece that looks like this. This is a technique I've not tried before, and I'm actually happy I tried it out and it didn't turn out too bad. I gave it a nice press to relax all of the stitching before I'm going to be putting right sides together and sewing up the side seams. Now if everything was done correctly, the side seam should match, and thank God it did. I'm sewing that up on a 1 centimeter seam allowance on the left and on the right side of my lining. I'm going to take this to my iron, give it a nice press, and this is what it is looking like so far. Once the lining is all joined together, I know it's ready to be connected to the main blazer along the neckline on the back, the front, and along the hem as well. So it's going to be one continuous stitch that goes all the way around. Now I'm just pinning it first, joining shoulder points to shoulder points, center backs to center backs, and matching notched points together, because the plan is to stitch from one end around the hem, up the front neckline, around the back neckline, down the other side, and around the entire hemline. That's how we're going to be finishing this. Once I was done stitching it up, this is what it looks like. Because we have the armhole open, that's how we're going to be turning it inside out. But before I turn it inside out, I say trim down the seam allowance, because if you don't trim it down and you turn it inside out, you find that the seam will be a little bit bulky, and even if you iron it down, it won't be very like nice and sharp. After turning the piece inside out, I went ahead to press all of the seams nice and flat, and this is what it looks like. I've just placed it on my mannequin so I'm able to mark where I want my buttonholes and my button to sit. I've marked this on the front edge around where the waistline is. Now, because I'm going to be having just one button, I've marked just one buttonhole, and I'm going to be fixing the buttonhole using my trusty old domestic machine. And once I had the buttonhole stitched into this side of the front, I'm going to be cutting the hole open using a small scissors. And once I had the buttonhole done, I knew I could focus on stitching in the button on the other side of the blazer. I'm going to be stitching in the button by hand, just the one button that has this really beautiful pearly white and rose gold detail on it. And once I was done stitching it up in place, I just tied up and secured my stitching on the back or the wrong side of this particular panel, and then just tested to be sure that the button would actually pass through the buttonhole. The last part I'm going to be working on is finishing the sleeve hem, since I'm not lining the sleeve, and this is going to be finishing it around that sleeve opening. You can decide to overlock this if you have an overlocker that can take the thickness of your fabric, but the fabric is quite thick and I didn't just want to risk it. But I'm going to be using a bias tape that cuts from the lining to finish off this particular seam. I'm going to be sewing this twice, one time on the tape or the piece of material open like this. Once I was done stitching it in like that, I went in and folded around the raw edge of the fabric so that conceals and finishes off the sleeve nice and neatly on the inside. I also didn't want to run the risk of the fabric irritating me like in my armpit or in that particular part, which is why I decided to go in to finish it off like so. You need to do this for both sleeves if you're doing this technique. Just know that it's a little bit fiddly since you're going to be sewing around curved edges and curved seams. This is how mine turned out. It's not even perfect. You can still see dodgy pads and pads that were not really straight, but I made it work. I did this for the other side to finish off the blazer. So this is the blazer all done. I have styled it with a white lace turtleneck blouse because it is quite fitted. Like, I can't wear anything thicker than this, so maybe like a thin jumper, a thin blouse, a shirt, or anything thick I won't be able to go through. This is the fit. Oh, it's so nice. I should be going somewhere. This is like, run me my check, like run me my money, like 5 digits upwards. This is so cute, so elegant, makes you feel very powerful and strong. That's how I feel when I put on this blazer. You could also dress this up or down depending on how you want to wear this. I think this is an amazing transitional piece and it's such a statement color. It's like red. You walk into the room and everyone immediately recognizes you, feels aura, feels energy and the mood. And I can't wait to wear this for meetings in real life and online because, I mean, why not? But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you've been recreating this, please tag me on social media at Kim Dave Designs. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. And until my next video, keep slaying, keep winning, and have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.